I am prepping my kitchen and melting down some beeswax to pour some beeswax jar candles. I have shared before how to make taper candles like these with just pure raw beeswax, and I will link that video down below. But for that, you would use a candle mold, and these are just pure solid beeswax. If you've ever worked with beeswax before, you have probably found that it's a very hard wax. And so it can be a little bit difficult when you're making a beeswax candle in a jar, because you really want to be able to achieve a full melt pool when burning candles in jars so that you don't have any wasted wax. This is actually a soy wax candle. This is one that is a little bit further along, and you can see that it's burned evenly all the way down, meaning that the wax has reached the edges of the jar on every burn. So that's what we want to achieve also with a beeswax jar candle. This is one that I had made and was testing out a wick on before, and you can see that the candle has burned down the center and there is some remaining wax on the edges of the jar. So this one did waste some wax, and we want to avoid this. We want to avoid having that tunnel down the middle and wasted wax. So I'm going to show you how to achieve a nice even burn. This is also a beeswax candle that you can see has burned down and has a pretty even burn on it. So that's what we want to achieve with our beeswax jar candles. I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. I'm going to be wicking these jars with an eco-friendly wick. So these are lead-free. The wick is made out of 100% cotton, and then it just has a vegetable wax on the outside of them. So in order to stick these to the jars, I'm going to use these little wick stickers that you can purchase online. I will link them down below. So you're just going to take your wick sticker and place it on the bottom of your wick and make sure that it is nice and center so you get a nice even burn. I like to secure the wicks by just pressing them down with one of these little wooden wick holders, or you can use a pencil or anything that's nearby and handy. So while that beeswax was melting, I had gone ahead and wicked these jars and set the wicks. And setting the wicks, I just used these little wooden sticks. I'll link those down below, or you could really use like a clothespin or anything that's gonna hold that wick tightly in place. I have wrapped the wick around the wick holder just to keep it nice and tight. You don't want any loose wick in your jar. You wanna really keep the wicks as tight and centered as possible for the best even burn. I had to pause candle making for a little while and get some kids off to baseball practice, but I do have the beeswax almost fully melted down now. I source our beeswax from a local honey farm here in the Midwest, and it comes in large blocks, too big to actually fit into a pouring pitcher. So what I do is either I have to chop it down, which can be very challenging, small enough to fit inside the pouring pitcher, or what I found works even better is I use a large wide stock pot and I melt the huge blocks of beeswax down using a large wide stock pot on very low heat, and that gets it small enough to where then I can pour it into my pitcher. So I have measured out the beeswax already and put it here in my pouring pitcher and am just melting it down using the double boil method. This beeswax is going to be cut with fractionated coconut oil. And the reason that I cut beeswax with fractionated coconut oil when making jar candles is so that it softens that wax so that you can get a full melt pool, so that you're not having any wasted wax. So you want your wick to be able to burn that wax all the way to the edges of the jar, so that it can burn to the edges and then burn down slowly. So you're going to get a nicer, longer, slower burn, rather than using just the straight raw beeswax like we do for the taper candles. If I was to just use the raw beeswax on its own, I would end up with a tunnel down the middle because it is a harder wax. It takes a little bit longer and it doesn't ever reach the edges of the jar. So then you're left with some wasted wax there. So that's why I choose to cut the beeswax jar candles with the fractionated coconut oil, and I do that at a 33% ratio. So it's 33% the fractionated coconut oil. So basically 1/3 of your batch of your beeswax is going to be the fractionated coconut oil. So I have already pre-measured these out. A good rule of thumb, if you are scenting your candles with an essential oil, is to use about 1 ounce or 30 milliliters of essential oil to 1 pound of wax. And that's the total wax weight, including the fractionated coconut oil. I've already pre-measured the essential oil. If you've worked with beeswax before, especially raw beeswax from a honey farm, the way that we get it, it already has a really nice honey-like, like a sweet aroma. So you definitely don't have to scent your candles, but I was going for a little bit more of like a warm, homey fragrance. So I did choose to use some cinnamon and nutmeg essential oil, and that's what I'm going to be scenting these candles with today. Again, that's not a necessary step, but if you are choosing to use an essential oil for scenting your candles, you can go ahead and add it to your pre-measured fractionated coconut oil before you add it to the wax. So now we have our beeswax. Now, temperature is very important when pouring your candles. So I'm going to go ahead and take the temperature here with my digital gun. And this wax is about 165 degrees right now. Now that that wax is fully melted, I'm gonna go ahead and add the fractionated coconut oil and those essential oils right in to the beeswax. And when you add the essential oil and fractionated coconut oil when you add that fractionated coconut oil to your already melted wax, it is going to bring the temperature down of your wax just slightly. So I will be taking the temperature here and actually mix that in. So just adding that fractionated coconut oil, I'm already seeing that my wax is starting to harden back up a little bit. So I'm gonna put it back on the heat, and I'm going to let the beeswax fractionated coconut oil mixture combine over the heat for just a few minutes so that it can fully mix together. The desired temperature that we're going for before we pour these candles is going to be just between 155 and 165 degrees. So I'm going to keep an eye on that for a few minutes, make sure that it's fully melted, and then I'm going to stir it for about 2 minutes once it is fully melted, just to make sure that it's all fully combined and we don't have any wax or oil that has settled in different places. You really want it to all come together before pouring it in the jars. Alright, it looks like that wax is fully melted again and well combined. I've stirred for a good little while now. So let's take the temperature and just see where it's at. (160 degrees), which is just about the perfect pouring temperature. Going to take it off. I'm gonna give my pitcher a couple of taps just to make sure there's no bubbles in the wax. And you can begin pouring right into the jars, and you're gonna wanna pour nice and slowly. Now it's important with a jar like this one where you see that you technically could come all the way up to the lip of the jar. You're going to want to stop at that widest part of the jar just because you want to create that full melt pool. I know I've talked about that a lot, but it is important for the best long-lasting quality burn in a candle to be mindful of how you can reach the edges of the jar. So if you were to pour all the way to the top, your melt pool is only going to be the size at the top of the jar, which means that once it gets down here to the wider part of your jar, you're going to have that wax remaining around the edges. So I only ever pour up to just the top of that widest part of the jar. What I like to do is go through each jar and just make sure that my wicks are nice and centered. So I'm going to put them in a place where they're not going to be disturbed. Make sure those wicks are centered. And also, once you've done that, you're going to want to give your jars just a little tap to eliminate any bubbles that might be working in there, because what happens is those bubbles rise to the top and then you end up with a little curve or indentation in the top of the wax. So if you're looking for a really nice smooth candle top, you want to make sure that there aren't any bubbles in the wax. I'm going to leave those candles to set and fully harden. I like to give them about 24 hours before trimming up the wicks. If you can burn them after 24 hours if you want to. I do usually choose to wait about a week just so that I can ensure that the candle has fully cured, and that if I've used essential oils, I know that waiting a little bit longer is going to give our candle a better scent throw. So I like to wait at least a week before burning. I've just noticed that they tend to last a little bit longer if you wait and let them fully set and then or fully cure. And then also you're going to want to trim your wicks to about 1/4 inch and keep them trimmed to 1/4 inch at every burn. On that first burn, it's very important that you burn your candle long enough to let the wax fully melt to the edges of the jar, because wax does have a memory. If you don't let your wax reach the edges of the jar on the first burn, that wax is going to follow the same pattern for every burn thereafter, and so you might end up again with that tunnel down the middle, which we know we don't want. We want to use up as much of the wax as possible and get the most life and longest burn out of our candles. That's why I always recommend making sure you burn it long enough to get that full melt pool and keeping those wicks trimmed to 1/4 inch. If I have missed anything or if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the comments down below. I will have a beeswax candle line being added to our shop coming this fall. It'll actually be earlier than fall. There are some candles listed there now, so feel free to check out that link below as well, along with all of our handmade soaps. One final tip that I forgot to share about pouring beeswax candles, or really any type of candles, is that notice I had one extra jar sitting here that I could have poured, but I chose not to. And the reason for that is I wanted to leave a little bit of wax from this same batch left in the bottom of my candle pitcher, because if for any reason my tops do not come out flat, or if there's any little bumps or holes in them or anything like that, I have wax that I can rewarm using that double boil method again, and just once they're fully hardened, I can top these candles off with the little bit of wax that is remaining in here to give my candles a really nice, smooth, even layer of wax at the top. And I think that's all. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy your hand-poured beeswax candles.